Greetings, YouTube. Mandarin has decided to join us and kind of skewed my cardigan. I apologize. So I was recently reading a book that dealt with the biotech century, the century that we're in. And ultimately, I didn't finish reading it. I discovered that I didn't really like what the writer was doing. His bias was really blatant. But it did get me thinking about something that I had come up with in the past, an idea that I'd never actually been able to implement. So I thought I'd throw it out there for the community at large. And that idea are post-apocalyptic Amazons. Now, in the animal kingdom, there are some reptiles, and I believe some fishes, that are capable of doing something known as parthenogenic reproduction. And this is when a female in isolation is still capable of bearing young, which are female clones of herself. It's not common, but it does happen. Even some of the more complex life forms, as in snakes, it has been observed to be a true fact. So since this behavior, this mechanism does exist in nature, at some point in our future, it will be able to be genetically spliced into a human being. Now, why would you do this? Well, I could think of a number of reasons. Two off the top of my head would be a lesbian separatist group. That's the most politically incorrect reason. But another reason would be for either a generation ship or for just colonists for off-world colonies, even if they're going to be transported from here to there in cryogenic stasis or stasis, depends how you want to say that. And that basically means that the colony is guaranteed to continue even if there are a number of people lost. It's unlikely that all the males will be lost, but this will be guaranteed that there will be a number of women who will still be able to breed. Now, how would this mechanism function? How I envision it is that at the end of the hormone cycle of growth, so around 20 or 21, the woman's hormone system changes, as all adults do as we get to the point where we're no longer growing, unless you happen to suffer from gigantism. And when that happens, she would automatically become pregnant and deliver a child. It would be a clone of herself. The hormones that are released during lactation would prevent her from having a self-breeding episode again. So eventually when the child finishes breastfeeding, the hormones would shift back to a normal state, and she would then once again become pregnant. Now, each cycle would do hormonal harm to the parthenogenic organ within her system. So by the end of the second pregnancy, the system was probably going to be shut down completely, but at the end of the third, it's going to be guaranteed gone. So every woman would have 2, possibly 3 pregnancies over a period of 2 to 3 years, depends on how long the child breastfeeds. And each one, again, would be a clone of the mother. After that point, she would be able to breed in a more conventional manner if males were available and she were so inclined. Now, it's an interesting idea, particularly in a post-apocalyptic setting, because such a woman is going to look perfectly pure strain human, and would be essentially pure strain human, just with a little extra feature, and would be highly prized by human separatist organizations before her a fact that she will breed true, even if there are not others there to help breed with her. Another angle you can take is that of a disease, an intentionally engineered disease that affects the human species. Now, I'm thinking of 3 different levels of this disease. At the lowest level, any woman infected becomes parthenogenic without their knowledge. And this could exist for quite some time, 15, 20, 25 years, before people began to realize that these women were having clones of themselves. Potentially, in some places, they may never notice it. It would just be a woman that had 2 or 3 women, female children, and then maybe a male after that. That's not that uncommon. So it may go for a very long time and the disease propagate very far before people begin to realize that there is in fact a disease in the world that's causing this. The second level of this, a little more serious, would be that males are also affected. They could be carriers in the first version, but in the second version, they're either being sterilized or their genes are being tampered with, so they're only fertilizing women with female children. So the males essentially are breeding themselves out of existence. And this would, again, take a little longer to propagate than at first, wouldn't be as slow as the first one, but it would still take a while before people begin to realize that why are there no male babies? And the last and most serious version would be that any male that contracts this disease is killed. And you get the whole why the last man scenario going on there. And again, what was the world going to look like without men? 90% of women are heterosexual. So there's going to be some really unhappy people. And what about transgender males? How much more difficult is it going to be for a transgender male in the future when they are the closest thing to males in the world? It's a very complex process. It's a very complex situation. But I think it has an interesting possibilities for either a science fiction or a post-apocalyptic setting. And so I thought I would just throw this idea out. I've never used it. I've always wanted to kind of use it. I never had an opportunity to. But there it is. So I'm looking forward to people having their thoughts on this expressed. I'd like to hear what people have to say. Have you ever used a mechanism like this in a campaign? Have you ever heard of a mechanism like this in a campaign? I know I encountered it at least once in a piece of fiction, but I can't for the life of me remember where. And this was years before Why the Last Man came out. I think it might have been a short story in a collection I read. I remember collectively the main female character in the story was black, but I'm not positive if that rings a bell for anybody. But I like the idea. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. And I think it would be a nice slant on, post-apocalyptic setting, and you find a colony of all women, except they have children, and they're not taking mates. So how does this happen? Does this make the party wonder, or don't they care? They just assume that they're practicing infanticide on the male babies. Who knows? But it's an interesting mechanism, at least. So, what are your thoughts on parthenogenesis?